So this is just going to be a little test video because I've got a new overhead digital microscope that I'm trying out. I spent about 50 minutes recording this and then realised I'd been talking to myself for about an hour because it doesn't have a microphone. The idea today is I'm just going to be servicing this English lever platform escapement from a carriage clock. The first section of the video is just me taking it apart and fault finding it for cleaning. You'll then later on I'll do another one of it being reassembled, hand cleaned and oiled. So the first thing we've noticed is this index is bent. Dead simple just to twist it back into shape really. Usually they get bent or twisted to one side to make a bit of extra clearance for being able to adjust them beyond where they're supposed to be adjustable. The screw heads are all a little bit damaged, so they will be repolished and re-blued, so we'll go through that as well during the repair and reassembly stage. And if you notice on top, that end stone is covered in shellac. That's why it's shining with a concave surface, and what looks like brass damage is actually just shellac. So here we are scraping some of that off just to try and show. Underneath that is actually, it's a hardened steel and very highly polished piece of steel that holds the end stone in place. The end stone obviously is a jewel that's domed on one side and perfectly flat on the other. It is supposed to be a good fit, but it's not supposed to be shellacked in place. So we will be removing all of that and trying to figure out whether it's the wrong size jewel or whether something else is wrong. So I'm just removing the screws and the washers. You can see the original silvering underneath. That's the colour the platform is supposed to be. And for some reason I'm spending a long time trying to show you the difference in colour. The lighting's not fantastic. I do discover later on that it's actually better if I move the lights away. So I've decided to move to a slightly more stable movement holder, which is the inside cardboard tube of a roll of sellotape or electrical tape. Obviously this isn't a good enough piece for a clean reassembly. This is an absolutely filthy piece that I've been using for years on the dirtiest work. You can see here the hairspring is not quite central. You've got closer coils on one side than the other, so that's going to need truing. But from the side, if we ignore the bit that's sticking up, which I'm just trying to demonstrate here, this piece here, that's the extended end, that's the extra bit of hairspring. But if we try to ignore that, you can see that the hairspring's flat from the side, but it's actually cocked up slightly on the right if you look at it from the front, so we'll need slightly truing in flatness as well. Nothing too significant there, nothing to really worry about. That's just a tweak when we reassemble. Give the balance a spin. You can see the hairspring is, let's see if we can get a better view. Trying to move in some light and so on to show you. What we're looking for here is that the hairspring is free to bounce between the curb pins there. On this particular one we have a pin and a boot. We're zooming in here. It's a manual focus microscope. It was the cheapest one available. It's nothing fancy, but it was £80, and look at the quality of the video that it's recording here is actually, I'm amazed by it, so hence this video. So you can see there we're looking for the spring being able to bounce around between the curb pins, and with a slight flick of the balance wheel. I don't know how clear it is on camera, but to me I can see that moving from curb pin to curb pin quite happily and then settling somewhere in the middle. That's exactly how it should be. You don't want it resting against a curb pin. So if we flip it upside down and take a look, we can see instantly that there is one jewel missing. We just have a hardened steel piece to take up the end shake of the pallet arbor there. As I'm pointing to here, the screws are in a slightly rough condition. The screw heads are not fantastic, and you'll notice that center, the jewel hole for the The balance there, once again, is full of shellac, so that has been stuck into place. And again, it's slightly more acceptable on the bottom because we can see it. We can't really see it when it's in the carriage clock, but we will be sorting that out. I don't mind it being shellacked in place particularly, as long as you can't see it. The top one really doesn't need to be. It just needs to be held in place tight enough that it doesn't move around. The bottom end stone actually does all of the work on a carriage clock platform because they're always that way up, so the end of the balance staff does rest continuously on that end stone. So popping out the screw so we can lift the cock off, and there is a slot at the back here where you can prise it away. It is pinned as well as screwed, so they are a bit tight sometimes. You can normally get them out of your tweezers, but not an issue. The strength of the hairspring is high enough that we can actually lift the balance out, so you don't have to worry about distorting the hairspring just by lifting the balance, as long as it's not stuck in the jaw hole. Okay, well, you can see can't see anything. You see on the bottom of the cock there, next to the screw hole on the right hand side, you can see both the slot and the two pins that hold the cock in place. And now we're looking at the bottom of the roller here. There seems to be shellac holding it onto the balance staff. That's not right. It should just be pressed on. It is a single roller, which means the safety action and holding the jewel is all done on one piece. So we're going to zoom in for a closer look here. I would suspect that either the roller's become loose through somebody fiddling with it, or it's a replacement balance staff. But it shouldn't be shellacked on, it should just be a press fit. And I mean, there is a chance that that's just some filth. Now you can see, if you're careful, that there is oil between my tweezers and the impulse jaw here. You can just about see a bead of it forming when I touch it with my tweezers. There's not supposed to be any oil there at all. That is supposed to run dry. It does not need to be oiled. It should not be oiled. So whoever did last repair this clock, there's no oil on the hairspring, so they haven't just sprayed oil at the clock. They have very carefully over-oiled everything. It was done intentionally. I don't know why. It's not a part of the clock that should be oiled. So we're just going to give this a quarter turn here. This is the boot, that's so that we can remove the hairspring. And then I like to just loosen that there. It's not a screw, but there is a slot for adjusting. And then if you get your tweezers under the pin, you can usually wiggle them free and pull it out. That is now the hairspring released from the balance cock, and you can just lift that straight up. So we can get the balance out of the way for now and come back to that later. Now we can see the jewel hole, and it does look as though, looking through that hole, there is actually a jewel underneath all of that shellac. So that's a good sign. The screw heads again are not in the best condition. Brushing away some shellac there, but there's enough meat there that we can tidy those up a bit. This is my first time working under a microscope and not being able to see what I'm doing properly, so you'll have to forgive my screwdriver angles and so on while I try and get used to that. You'll notice the screwdrivers are generally quite tidy and well finished. If you do happen to slip or encounter a tight screw, then it does minimize the damage that you're likely to do. It also minimizes your chances of slipping. Okay, so we've got these dimples here raised all the way around the edge where the index rests. That has been done intentionally by somebody to try and tighten the friction of the index. And we'll discuss that a bit more in a minute. So just zooming in on that jewel, it should be a flat, perfectly reflective surface, and that ring you're seeing in the center when we refocus Once we're zoomed in, there we go. That ring around the center hole there, that is just dried oil. That is actually perfect amounts of dried oil. If that was wet, you would like to actually see the oil extend to about that position when you look at it through the jewel hole. So that was once perfectly oiled, probably many decades ago to have dried out quite that much. So those dimples around the edge, someone has dug their graver in to try and raise a burr. That will tighten. So when the end stone is screwed into place and it pulls the index down against those burrs, it just makes it a little bit of a tighter fit. It's a bodge, it's not the way you do it. The end stone, the carrier there, the steel piece, should be, if it's not tight enough, it should be slightly reduced in thickness so that it pulls down tighter on the index. That would also solve the problem with the jewel in the end stone there being a bit too loose and needing shellacking in. So it is possible that that's a replacement piece. Quite a few of these platforms are actually quite interchangeable, so I've got a box full of these somewhere and I might find one that will fit, but chances are I won't bother. I will just reduce the thickness of this one until everything feels nice and tight and secure, or possibly just replace the end stone. So we're just going to scrape out all of this shellac and see what condition that end stone is in underneath. So this is fairly standard service stuff really. This is the kind of thing we see every day. This is why a clock repair, although to a lot of people is just take it apart and clean it, it's significantly more than that. You can see this is one part, and this is about well, it's about a 50-minute recording. I don't know how much is going to make it into the video, but about a 50-minute recording of me just inspecting it without even cleaning it and doing the repairs. It's about 50 minutes just to inspect the platform properly, and try and figure out why people have done the repairs they've done in the past and whether we're going to have to live with that or whether we can put them right. So now the balance and balance cock are out the way, we can have a look at the remaining bits of the escapement. I can see instantly a ring of green around that balance hole, where the that balance jewel hole, and there's oil on the horns there where the previous repairer has oiled the safety action and the ruby, the impulse ruby or impulse jewel. Again, it should not be oiled. The balance is absolutely flooded with oil there, and it has dried to a green ring where it's been a couple of decades. The pallet appears to be unoiled at the pivots, and the escape wheel teeth are absolutely covered in oil. They don't look damaged. This is the English style lever escapement. That is, the wheel has pointy teeth. The Swiss style has clubbed teeth. Depending on whether this video actually ever gets watched by anybody, I may do a club tooth escapement eventually. I'd also quite like to do a modern escapement with the shock settings. This one does not have shock absorbent jewels at all. They're quite an interesting design, and they are in pretty much every modern clock. We'll just pop these screws out, and then this bridge can be removed. Again, there are two slots to prise up the bridge with a screwdriver or pair of tweezers. As long as you do this gently, you can do it without damaging anything. Obviously, it may lever forwards and press down against the escape wheel if you're not careful, and put pressure on the pivots there and the jewels. So just got to be a bit careful here getting those pins out. They are, just like the balance cock was, screwed and pinned to position them. So you can just about see the pins there, nicely fitted and rounded over. And do I turn it upside down so you can have a proper look? Yes, I do. You can also see the filed slot leading up to the screw hole there next to the pin. that is the slot for prizing them apart. So I like to just tilt things around until we get the light reflecting on them, just like that. You can actually see a ring of oil in that top jewel. That's the pallet jewel. That's where the pallets pivot. That should not have been oiled. There is a ring of oil. It's dry now, so it's not really a concern, but it was once oiled. So we will be cleaning all of that off. We're just checking the escape wheel there. Again, it looks as there's a little ring of dirt there, so it probably was once oiled. But we're just checking for chips around the hole and any damage at the moment. We're not seeing any damage, just dirty dry oil. So just to try and demonstrate that that's oil, I'm just going to give it a quick scrub with a piece of pegwood to show that it comes away. Oops, shot that across the workshop. Okay, and you can see there that it's all smeared, and underneath there's a nice clean jewel, not a crack. Okay, now we can get a proper look at the escape wheel. So it's absolutely filthy, so it's actually quite hard to see the condition of the teeth properly. Slightly concerned here that this one looks ever so slightly bent, but actually I think it's just that lump of dried oil on there just distorting the view slightly. So picking that off, does look straight. We won't know until it's clean whether there's any particularly short teeth that might cause the escapement to run through. We're hoping not. We're just going to check the pivots. Again, getting used to working under a microscope, so there will be slips and droppages throughout this video. What am I doing here? Okay, I think we've pushed the escape wheel to the side for now. We're just having a quick look at the lever now. So you can see that end's been oiled. And we'll just lift this out. If I can grab that pivot with no depth perception, looking through a screen. So one of the interesting things you can see here is if you look at the pallet staff, where the tweezer is pointing right there is a section of thread. These pallet staffs are threaded into the pallets. They can just be unscrewed and replaced. It's not quite as simple as just replacing them. You do have to get the same thread and so on. But that is how they're fitted, so don't try to punch them out if you ever do have to replace them. Some of them, a vast majority of these older ones at least, are threaded. So I'm just cleaning some of the oil off of the jewels here. The jewels are set into slots in the pallets. I just need to wipe the oil off as much as I can so that we can check that they're not chipped. You can also see from here that the pivots look in relatively good condition. So there's no real concerns there. I generally won't burnish these for no reason unless they're horribly scored and worn. I tend not to because they're very small pivots. I don't really want to be reducing them any further by repolishing and reburnishing them. We'd like them to last. So you see straight away that that pallet jewel, the lower jewel there, appears to be split into several sections. So chances are, once we're in focus, yeah, you can see that that is quite badly cracked jewel that has been running like that, I expect. So chances are when this last, it hurts me to use the word, but repairer assembled the clock, the pallets possibly weren't in the hole when they tightened up the screws on the bridge, therefore cracking it and chipping off a big section on the underside. The escape wheel jewel looks fine, so we'll just flip it upside down now and look at the underside. I'll zoom back out. So you can see why this takes so long. We're 20 minutes in now and we're only really just starting to inspect the actual components. So as we're taking things apart, we are just checking that the screws are doing their job properly, and this one appears to be holding on quite well. So it felt like it was about to come out, and then it wasn't. Sometimes it just needs an extra like quarter of a turn, and then it will pop back into place. And I do find it easier just to hold the screw and turn the workpiece. Probably not the most professional thing to put on camera, but whatever works. Okay, so the endstone looks fine, and we're just going to have a proper look at that jaw hole. And the jaw hole from here looks absolutely fine. So we don't always remove this cock. A lot of people don't remove them at all, but I will be resilvering this platform and refinishing the screws. This is a stock clock that will be going up for sale. Not on my website, on another shop's website. I don't actually deal with sales because I just don't have the staff to be able to man a workshop. So it's quite tight, so I'm just trying to push the pins out from the underside. It's probably never been removed before, to be completely honest. They only need to come off for silvering, and if it's never been resilvered, there we go. So it needed a big push with, well, I used the end of a brooch because my tweezers weren't working, so I needed something with a handle on it to get enough push on there to separate these. Obviously you've got to be quite careful, you don't want to slip and put a big scratch in the top of the platform. So that's the original silvering underneath. Again, you can see the colour difference. And that's the slot for prizing it off if you get lucky and you can prize it off. And you see that's hand filed there. Looks hand filed to me anyway. So we'll move on to the other two jaw holes. Obviously this end stone for the pallets here is missing its stone component. So again, I think I've got a few of these. I might not have a perfect fit, but if I've got one where a jaw hole actually aligns with the hole for the where the end stone actually aligns with the jaw hole, then I'll probably replace this. The screw head is also absolutely knackered. And the screw didn't seem to be doing much of a job anyway, so I think that screw will probably be replaced with one that's slightly longer that holds on properly. So you see here lots of oil. This should not have been oiled at all. So you do not oil the pallets. If they're in a brass pivot, there is an argument towards oiling them, but it does, in theory, it does reduce the action of the balance. I work mainly in clocks, so they generally have enough power that you don't really see the difference, but in a watch you may notice a difference there. So we're just going to zoom in and have a proper look at this jaw hole. Oil everywhere. You just have to bear with me while I try and get a good angle and get this in focus for you. We'll zoom in as close as we can. Okay. Okay, so I've just cleaned the oil off so you can see properly, and there is a big chunk of jewel missing there right on the edge of the hole. There are 3 radiating cracks coming out of the hole. So that's the best angle there. That light should just be a flat sheet of light across the top of the jewel. You can see the chunk missing and a small chunk on the opposite side as well. So we are going to have to replace that. That is a rubbed in jewel. So you can see from this side as well, there is no rubbed in setting. And on this side, if we can find it, where have you gone? Where have you gone? There we go. That is the rubbed setting. We'll try to explain that a bit better when we come to actually replacing the jewel. Hopefully I'll find something suitable to do that with. I've got a few scrap platforms and things. Sometimes you can remove a jewel from one of those. If not, you can fit modern press fit jewels into a rub setting. I just prefer to use the older, let's say, recycled jewels where possible. Okay, now we're on to the final balance jewel. I got interrupted by my phone for a second there, so I don't know what the sound's doing in that particular area. Picking off the shellac, see what sort of jewel we've got underneath here, and actually it's looking like we've got quite a tidy jewel underneath here. So why that was shellacked in, I'm not entirely sure. Probably was just a little bit loose, but that little bit of shellac around the edge is enough to hold it. With the excess cleaned off like that, I'm actually happy to leave that as long as it stays where it is and doesn't become loose. We'll just pop this screw out. This screw's actually got the best conditioned head that we've seen so far, so it shouldn't be a big problem to restore. It's just going to need, I think maybe I'm turning the screwdriver here and it's not actually coming out of the hole. Yes, it's not coming out of the hole at all. As I turn it, the screw is far too short and barely holding on. So hopefully we'll be able to put that screw in a different hole, and perhaps the problem screw that we had holding the endstone for the pallets on is just in the wrong hole. It's possible that these two screws have been swapped over and that's why nothing fits. Look at that oil. Okay, we need a very sparing amount of oil on these pivots, and we'll cover that when we come to reassembling this clock after oiling. I'm not going to do the whole clock on camera, I'm just going to do the platform escapement. That seems to be the place where people struggle. So there's a lot of oil there. So we need to clean some of that off just so we can see the condition of the jewel hole. A bit of Rodico. It's normally good for that. Okay, and we can see that the jewel doesn't have any chips missing. We'll zoom in a bit for a better view. I am sat by a main road. It is the quietest room in the shop, but it's still not ideal. So it looks like there's a couple of scratches on the jewel there, but they are just blobs of oil. There is a significant amount of oil on the other side of this jewel hole too. You can see it through the hole there. And as I lean in and touch it here, you can see capillary action just draw it out through the hole, and it will go all over there we go, just back all over the jewel. That's how horribly over-oiled this has been. So we'll have to clean that off again. Hopefully that will remove those lines as well, and you can see, try and absorb as much as I can with a piece of kitchen roll this time. That will draw it through from the other side. A bit of Rodico to clean the surface, and it looks like a chip there. That is again still just a piece of oil, a drop of oil that's been poured through. There we go, absolutely perfect jewel hole, nothing to worry about. So that's the damaged one that we'll be replacing, and the escape wheel jewel hole is on the escapement, escape arbor cock, so that's not on the platform anymore. So we'll zoom back out, have an overall look. So this is the underside, and this will all just be re-silvered. I can actually give it a clean with some cream of tartar first. That will remove all the blackening from the silvering. We can see what sort of condition it's in. I do think it will need a new layer of silver, which is a chemical process. It's not electroplating, it's a reaction Don't clean it with wire wool. That's not a good idea. I don't know why I even did that. Maybe I was saying don't scrub it with wire wool. That might have been it. Who knows? Who knows what was going through my mind then? I think maybe I was saying don't scrub it with anything. We can clean it chemically. We'll go with that. So yes, this will all just be resilvered, but after I give it a clean with cream of tartar, see what the condition is, and then we'll come back to it. So now we can look at the balance properly. So overall it looks okay. We can see a few spots of rust on the arms there. The hairspring is sitting quite nicely. The coils are nice and even, which means when they're uneven in the clock, it's because it's not fitted properly. So that's all adjustable. That's quite easily done. Again, that will be done during the assembly. So let's zoom in and have a proper look. You want to check the pivots, the hairspring, everything else about it. So that's that top pivot. Looks good. Looks absolutely fine. There's the roller there, the single roller, and the impulse pin. Absolutely covered in oil. But that bottom pivot also looks absolutely fine. So I think this may have been a replacement balance staff. Can't see any other reason for wanting to shellac on that single roller there. And then you can see the rust occurring there. We'll remove the hairspring later and just give that a quick clean up with a fiberglass scratch brush. It doesn't have to be perfect. The rust doesn't affect the going of the clock, but we would like it to look nice. It's not a part we're going to be polishing on a platform escapement, as it never would have been polished originally. So it's completely apart now, and here is our pile of bits. One end stone that needs a proper stone fitting so that it actually fits. Got a couple of screws that we need to look into as to whether they fit the holes properly or if they're just in the wrong holes, which is quite commonly seen. I don't tend to keep the screws separate. I let them all mix up. With a bit of common sense, you can usually figure out which one goes in which hole, and if they don't fit properly, you swap them around. You don't have to put the exact same screw in the exact same hole. You need to find one with the proper fit. This one here that I found in the endstone for the pallet arbor, I think actually probably belongs to the balance endstone. So I think those screws have probably been swapped around, but until it's clean, I'm not going to bother to try and reassemble and test that theory. So at this point, I'm just going to clean off some of the excess oil, shellac, etc. See what sort of condition everything is in, whether there's any other bits I have to replace. Check the real life condition of the end stones and pick off the thickest pieces of oil that are dried on there. Clean out the pinion. It all just makes the cleaning process a bit easier once it's in the machine. The machine does a lot of work, the chemicals do a lot of work, but unless you clean off the thickest pieces of residue, there will always be something left behind. So now we're talking about those raised burrs there again. It's a bit repetitive. But generally speaking, if the piece that I'm holding in my tweezers here is too thick, it won't clamp down tight enough to hold the end stone and the index in place. And that's probably why these burrs have been raised, to lift the index up, to press it harder into this piece. The other option is you thin this piece down. That's easily done. You put it on a diamond lap, put your finger on top and you scrub it backwards and forwards. That's going to make it thinner. It's going to make it hold the jewel hole, make it hold the end stone jewel a lot tighter and the index a lot tighter. That could solve all of our problems here with the shellac and the raised burrs. So don't go raising burrs on platform escapements, it's completely unnecessary. If you think about how things work, you can take the right steps to adjust the right component rather than completely defacing the wrong components. So just coming in with my piece of pegwood, which actually isn't a piece of pegwood, it's a bamboo skewer for the barbecue, because I ran out of pegwood and this is all they had at the shops. Obviously you can't really nip down to Sainsbury's and buy a bag of pegwood. There will be some in my next order, but this is good enough just for knocking off the excess oil, just giving each jewel a rub to remove any significant chunks. A little twist up the hole there. Just working our way through the jewels. This is the escape wheel jewel, the top escape wheel jewel, and then that top pallet jewel. And you can see in the reflection that I've just knocked off that excess oil, that ring of dirt. Little twiddle in the hole there just to clean out the oil sinks, which were pretty empty anyway. So is this the moment where I figured out that less lighting seems to work better? Quite possibly so. So we're just going to very gently dab the end of this in some Rodico and clean off some of that oil that shouldn't be there. There should be none on those horns at all. But obviously we've got that safety pin, which is just a very thin brass pin sticking up in the air there, so we can't just stab it into the Rodico. Rodico will now hold it still for me while I take a piece of pegwood and just buff up those faces of the actual jewels. These jewel faces have to be perfectly clean when we reassemble the clocks, so we will hand clean them now. We will chemically clean them in the ultrasonic tank, and then we will hand clean them again before final reassembly and oiling. This is an important part. You leave any cleaning fluid residue on there. Cleaning fluid is designed to break down oils to help remove them from the clock during cleaning. So if you leave residue on anything that is being oiled in the clock, it will break down. It will not last as it's supposed to. So just cleaning off the end stones here. Bit of Rodico to get rid of the excess oil. Bit of a scrub to get rid of the dried on bits from the jewel hole. I tend to find these round bits, if you don't hold them just right, they pivot around. You can see in the center, in just the right light, that there's a little dot. That's actually a wear groove from the end of the pivot resting on that lower end stone. We'll probably see that on all of these jewels. Perfectly normal, and in a platform escapement doesn't really cause much of a problem. In a watch which runs in different positions and so on, that would cause a bit of drag and a bit of a timekeeping issue in different positions. So like I say, in a platform escapement for a carriage clock, you can adjust the timekeeping. There you go, it's more prominent in this one. You can see that wear groove in the middle, that just that dot where the pivot is constantly rotating in the same spot. The dust from the air and the imperfections in the oil and so on will wear that away. So if the end stone is loose, I like to put them on a piece of paper, face down, just give it a rub with my finger, and you'll see, once we get the light on there, how perfectly clean that makes the end stone. You'll notice this top end stone has absolutely no wear in it, because in a carriage clock, where the clock is always the right way up, it does absolutely nothing. All it really does is help hold the oil in place over the jewel hole. That only works if they're properly oiled anyway. So we'll do the same here, we'll just clean this off. I'll probably be replacing this component anyway. You can look at all that oil coming off onto the paper. I will be trying to replace this if I can find a suitable replacement piece. And that's got most of the oil off except for a ring around the edge. I won't worry too much for now. The escape, well, why am I throwing everything around? It was the end of the day. So what I'm going to do now is take a piece of pegwood and I'm just going to stroke it along the pinions here to remove any stubborn dirt. You can actually see, we'll zoom in a bit later, but I can feel as I'm rubbing over with the pegwood there a sort of a bump, and that is the wear groove where the contrate wheel is in contact with the pinion. If it's been running for the last 100 years with the same contact point, that you can see that shiny spot there, that is the wear groove. We'll zoom in and have a proper look once I've picked out the worst of this dirt. That will also show you just how dirty this really is. I really am just knocking off the lumps. The cleaning machine will do the majority of the cleaning, and then we'll reassess everything with the microscope at the end before we oil and reassemble and oil. Okay, and there's the dirt you can see there. That is directly transferred from the teeth of the contrate wheel. You'll notice I'm resting the lower corner of the pinion on the tabletop. I'm not resting the pivot, and I'm trying not to rest the teeth of the escape wheel. The thickest part of this whole assembly is that pinion. That can bear the force of just being worked with a piece of pegwood. Okay, so I'm just going to try to focus in here. So this is after giving it a bit of a clean. You can see certainly not good enough yet. Just going to come in with a bit of Rodico and pick some of that up so that it looks a bit cleaner for the demonstration. No, I'm not. I'll obviously do that in a minute. So you can see the wear groove there, picking up the light, top and bottom edges. That is the thickness of the tooth of the contrate wheel. And as I slide my piece of pegwood along there, I can actually feel it as quite a deep step. It's not deep enough to worry about. You do see them cut a lot deeper than this sometimes. But you tend to get a step at the bottom and the top because of the way the contrate wheel rotates. The bottom of its tooth touches first, and then you get more of an even touch, and then you get the top of the tooth touching on the way out of engagement. And that's why the bottom and the top wear a bit worse than the middle, so you get these two lines worn into the clock. You don't really need to know that, but it's just quite interesting, and it obviously makes you think about the way these things actually work rather than just it wears. Now we're just going to check these teeth. You see they all look nice and straight. They all look relatively uniform in their size. I'm not seeing anything too concerning, so I think this clock will probably reassemble nicely. Just checking the pivots. Top one's fine. Bottom one's fine. Other than the cleanliness. But this has not been cleaned yet. All I've done is pick off the lumps. That will be absolutely fine. Okay, we are getting towards the last 5 minutes of this video, so sorry it's taking so long, but this is just the real process of going through. I think this is just me trying to see what that lump is there. I think it's just a dry bit of oil, but it looked like it might be some kind of insect. Okay, so we're actually 45 minutes in at this point, and all we've done is assess the damage. We haven't done any repairs at all yet. So now we're just going to start putting things into the cleaning basket. So this is a miniature basket. I will put the escape wheel and the lever in one basket. They are both light enough that they will not damage each other. Obviously, if you've got more baskets and more space and so on, then feel free to separate every single component. The more separated they are, the better. Okay, and I quite like using these baskets, these screw-in baskets. I've got one that's about the right size for a balance wheel. And actually, it will support the rim so that I know the balance and the hairspring, the balance staff, sorry, and the hairspring are both just free floating, and the balance wheel itself is being held by the rim. Very gentle screwing that down. You don't need to do it tight, you just need to give it a slight pinch so that it holds in place. And you can see through the wire here that the balance spring is free to bounce around. You can just about see the block there bouncing around in the light. Completely unsupported, the balance spring is free to vibrate and get cleaned nicely by the ultrasonics. I think that's probably the safest way to clean the balance and balance spring, in my opinion. And in the final basket, we just put all the small parts. I might need to edit out some stomach gurgles. Okay, so screws this size can go in, or they're big enough to go in the main basket. If they're any bigger than that, I tend to put them in the main basket. The basket is from a Brenray cleaning machine, which I tend to find gives me better results than the ultrasonic tank. I don't have an expensive modern watch cleaning machine with automatic basket swapping and all that business. Just an old-fashioned Brenray machine with the 3 jars and then the heater, which I never use because all it does is bake on any cleaning fluids that haven't been removed properly. So all of these parts can just go into the main basket, The index, you do need to just close that that boot at the end there. That will just support the pin, that thin pin slightly, give it a bit of protection if anything does try to fall on it. We don't want that getting bent. They are quite flexible, so you can bend them back if it does happen, but we don't really want that to happen, so just giving that a quick twist protects everything. And I'd normally leave the main part of the platform out of the basket for cleaning. That will just go in the ultrasonic tank with the small gears and so on of the clock. But for now, I'm just going to stick it in the basket to one side because I do have the rest of the clock to work through before I clean this anyway. So I'll just pop that in there for now. And again, I do try to stop the big bits from crushing the little bits where possible. I don't know why I'm trying to make you dizzy. Okay, so this will all go through the cleaning process and resilvering. I'm not going to record that purely because I don't have a camera other than this microscope. I do have my phone, but I don't have any way to hold it, so it's just completely unnecessary to record. So next time we see this, it will be a nice clean platform ready for repairs and reassembly.